Welcome to this episode of Prairie People's Poetry, a spotlight series highlighting Saskatchewan spoken word artists through performances and conversation on the craft and community of the art form. I'm your host, Cat Abenstein, and today we're talking with writer, poet, and spoken word artist, Elka Scott.
Hi, I'm Elka Scott. I am a writer of many disciplines: poetry, fiction, graphic novels, basically whatever I feel like writing that particular day. I live as a bisexual, non-binary person with mental health challenges, and I love cats and Dr. Pepper.
Fantastic. Thanks for being here. So let's just dive right in. You mentioned a lot of different genres and styles of writing that you do. Can you tell me a little bit about what you write about?
I am very inspired by science fiction and horror and fantasy. So most of what I write comes from a place of kind of like mysticism and weirdness and kind of pushing the boundaries of technology and sociology. As unbelievably pretentious as that sounds, that's where I get most of my inspiration from, is from the weird and the interesting and all the crazy things happening around the world.
This poem is called Conjugation. It is in memory of a few people. It's in memory of Mab, Grace, Uncle Jack, Uncle Doug, Grandpa, and Jazzy. The hardest part of loss is conjugation, shifting verbs into past tense. She used to love peanut butter treats and popcorn, eating them out of my shaking hand. He watched hockey 5 nights a week, sometimes on the French channel, despite not actually speaking French. He drew grain elevators because he couldn't bear to see them fade away. She loves me. She loved me. If I could, I would take a red pen to my heart to correct my English, but I can't edit out this hurt. I can't change the impermanence of language. Words fall in and out of use, and hearts and bodies fail. I've always been a writer. I use words to illustrate, to imagine, to invent. Language isn't supposed to fail me like this. If words shape reality, maybe if I refuse to change my tenses long enough, talk about them like they're still here, maybe I can bring them back. Maybe love is learning to speak badly, use the wrong tense, refuse to take critiques. People tell me to move on, to edit myself, to stop pretending. Don't they see that I know they're gone? Why won't they let me hold my departed under my tongue and let me whisper their names in future tense? Don't they see that language is only given meaning by those who speak it? What meaning am I supposed to make of this? Love is refusing to correct my grammar. It is telling the language police that they can go to hell. I keep clinging to scraps of notebook paper with peanut butter stains and grain elevators doodled in the margins because I cannot find the words to let go. I can't edit out this hurt. I can't erase these mistakes and regrets like wrong answers. Was is one of the hardest words to say in the English language, and I'm not ready yet. Wherever my departed are now, I know that they still love me. I still love them. I will never conjugate that.
Does your writing process differ from style to style?
I want to say it does, but I know for a fact it doesn't. I write poems like a fiction writer, and I write fiction like a poet. So my fiction has long, rambly, pretty sounding paragraphs that don't really relate to the rest of the story, and then my poetry always tells a story.
I like that. Listening to some of your poetry earlier, I noticed that, there's a strong storyline to your pieces. One piece in particular, I was curious if you could elaborate a little bit on it. That was your Conjugation Poem. Mm-hmm. And the line that really you ended with, that really stuck out to me was, "They still love me and I still love them. I will never conjugate that." So what inspired you to write that?
Unfortunately, I dealt with a lot of loss in a short period of time. I had quite a few pets pass away. I had my grandfather pass away, and then I had a friend who lost their battle with cancer. And they were out of province and I wasn't able to see them. And I think that line is just accepting that even if I wasn't able to see her or be with these people at the moment of their passing, that they're still with me. And I'm never going to change that. They're always going to be there in my heart and in my soul.
Do you find art or writing for you is healing?
Extremely. That's why I started writing in the first place. I had a lot of feelings and difficult emotions as a kid, and just writing was the only place that was safe for me to express those things.
How do you think art can heal?
I think that art, it provides a safe place for people to express things. And I think sometimes when you have a problem or an issue that you're going through, you think about it and you think about it, and the thinking just kind of goes in a circle. When you have art to put out that feeling or put out those pains, it gets you to think about it in a different way. You think, what color is this pain? What word best describes what I'm feeling right now? And you can kind of process it better once you look at it in a completely different way.
What is some advice that you've been given in terms of writing and art that has helped you to become a better writer?
Some of the advice that I've been given that has helped me become a better artist and a better writer is going to be very cheesy, but I'm a massive fan of the television program RuPaul's Drag Race. And before I do my poems and before I do anything art that makes me anxious, I say in my head, "Water off a duck's back." And to me, that means no matter what happens, it's impermanent. I can change it, it can be altered. It's just water flowing off a duck's back into the greater stream of consciousness, and I can come back to it once I dive under the water again like a little duck.
How do you know when something that you've written is finished?
I subscribe to the idea that a work of art is never finished, it's just abandoned. So I will come back to the same piece over and over throughout the years, and when I'm sick of looking at it and I think that there's nothing more I can add to it, then that's when I know it's finished.
This poem is called Legacy. People keep telling me that I need to forgive you. I think it's because they're sick of hearing me talk about you. The problem is, they don't know what you look like when you cry, and they don't know what you look like when you're hungry for human flesh. It's easier for them not to acknowledge the cannibal you really are. I still taste you in the back of my throat when I breathe, and I can still feel your fingers like insects crawling over my skin at every touch. I realize there is never going to be one last rape poem. There is no such thing as getting over it. Because you left me more broken glass than person, our relationship was an icy Saskatchewan highway, and we were destined to spin out of control as soon as our tires touched the road. I was a mixed bag of mental health issues, and you were a wound that never fully healed and learned to love the stink of rot. Love was a game where neither of us knew the rules but didn't want the other to know that. I realized after the fact that meant neither of us won. Neither of us won. I called you a cannibal, a monster, but the truth is, I've seen you bleed, and I've seen you cry. The moral of most monster stories is that humans are the real villain. Humans destroy most of what they touch by accidents. Humans can stop themselves, but don't. Humans are only human. You are only human. That is the hardest part of this to accept. Shared humanity, this thread that ties us together, it is a noose around my neck. Because I'm not afraid of you now. It's the drop and the swing that I worry about. I'm afraid of the creature inside me that tells me to rip you apart, break you like glass, swallow your lies, and spit out bones. You have made me as hungry for violence as you are. It is different, but the same. This is the noose, our shared monstrosity, and I hate you more than I ever thought possible. But you're so thin now. You look like an after picture in a PSA. Your eyes are as sunken and as hollow as I pictured them when I imagined your misery. I think the only thing you're desperate for now is hedonism at its finest. I can't kill what's already dead. I can't hurt someone who is already hurting themselves worse than I ever could. You are a cross on the side of the road. I cannot help but feel pity for you before I move on to someplace better. There is never going to be one last rape poem, but I think that's okay. I used to define myself by the shards in my hands and the cracks you left in me. I thought that I was your victim, your legacy, and maybe in some strange way each tribute I paid to your sickness would cure you, or at least spread awareness of your infection. Maybe that was winning, but no, it wasn't. I am my own legacy because I stitched myself back together. I melted myself back together and I show my scars to the world. You are your own victim. You are your own legacy. And in the end, that's what you deserve. People keep telling me that I need to forgive you. It is an act of healing to realize that I can define what this means for myself. Forgiveness means that your existence doesn't make mine worse. Forgiveness means that I can see you as a person instead of a monster. Forgiveness is accepting that in most things there are no winners. The only prize is moving on and cutting the rope. So this is my legacy now. Time to move on. Goodbye.
What does your editing process look like?
I follow kind of Stephen King's kind of editing. He wrote in, I forget which book it is because I didn't buy it, but that one, yes. That he puts his manuscript in a drawer for 3 months, a year, something like that. For poetry, I will write it and then set it aside for a week and then come back to it and then set it aside for another week and then come back to it. And I'll read it aloud to myself and then I'll look at it on the computer. And finally, I will cut it out into the cue cards so then I can have it broken up into smaller pieces so I can kind of see what works and what doesn't. I find changing the medium that you're working in can be really, really helpful for editing.
So what are some opportunities that you've been given or that you found because of your writing?
I was given the opportunity to apply and receive a grant from the Saskatchewan Arts Board to write a graphic novel. The graphic novel is completed and it's in the rewriting stage, which is very research heavy, so unfortunately I can't give anybody a time frame as to when they're going to see it, but it is done. I was selected to be a member of the Regina Slam poetry team. I forget which year it's in because my memory isn't super great for dates like that. And it helped me get into grad school for art therapy.
Has your art changed since you've formalized some of your training around your art?
Definitely. It's become a lot more, I think, process-driven. I think it's become, I used to just kind of write when I felt like it or what I was feeling. But now since I've received more formal training, I take a bit more of a conscious, thoughtful approach to it. I'll track my word count so I can see just what I'm doing and how much I'm doing of it. I have days that I schedule out in my calendar to do specific things. So Wednesday is my day for researching, Thursday is my day for editing, Monday is my day for sending out work. I think in almost making it more, I don't want to say businessy, because that's not the right word, but making it more structured. Training has helped with that, and I find that I'm much more prolific now. I'm much more able to push through writer's block and deal with any other kind of things that come up like that.
Just a comment, I had heard one person, in terms of what time management is, call it time scheduling, and it was just a matter of like making the time to do that. It sounds like you're well on your way. Yes. So what are some goals that you have for yourself and for your writing?
I am 27 now, and I would like to become a published novelist by the time I'm 30. I would also love to release a chapbook of poetry and maybe even a spoken word album. I think that would be really cool.
This poem is called Still Here, and there's a bit of a story behind it. I first wrote it when I was able to live out as myself after I left my parents' home and trying to balance what it means to be Christian and LGBT. I choose to perform it today because a lot of the issues that I spoke about all those years ago are sadly still very relevant. And I will keep performing it until those issues are no longer relevant. I always suspected that God made a mistake when he made me. I wonder if he was running short on time, so he just slapped together some parts left over from more perfect beings. While I want to think the best of God, I am stuck with these feelings that I am told are unholy. I read in a book once that God writes things on your heart before you're born. I've traced the letters on mine over and over, but still I do not believe him. When I was little, I assumed everyone else was queer too. It was only when I realized that this was not actually the case that I shut myself off from the world and enclosed myself in my own body like a non-binary coffin. I am still locked in this space that smells like old clothes and self-loathing. It is always cold, just like the way I'm treated by people who used to be my friends. Frost creeps up the ventricles of my heart, and I remind myself, I am still here. I'm either told to stay in this space, or I'm told to wear this target on my back like a badge of honor. The people telling me this have never actually been shot at. If what I am is a sin, and Jesus died for my sins, then he has died 1,000 deaths. When my sexuality is barely mentioned in my textbook about diversity, and when I'm told that I am not welcome in the community because I am not queer enough to count, I think of Jesus. Forgive them, for they know not what they do. And I ask him, how do you forgive them, Jesus, when they know exactly what they're doing? I wonder if God knows there are too many coffins wrapped in rainbow flags because there are too many soldiers who went home. They are the people that his name buried, piling hatred and bigotry onto their bodies until their young bones could not take the strain. Because they cannot, I keep repeating the mantra to myself, I'm still here. I'm still here. Because no matter how bad it became or how bad it becomes, I will still be here, and I always will be here, because I have learned to crawl out of the grave dug for me like a fabulous bisexual zombie, and I will shout to the heavens, I am still here. I will trace the letters written on my heart, even if I never believe them. They are the same letters written on those hearts that no longer beat. When I was born, God wrote one word on my heart, perfect. I like to think he didn't make a mistake.
Is there a performance or a situation where you were able to share your writing, either with a small group or a class, something that you can sort of tell us about?
So as I mentioned, I was in school for art therapy. which was a very interesting experience because while I was a primarily literary artist, all of my classmates were visual artists. They were sculptors and they were painters, and they, I felt kind of like I was falling behind because we'd do clay exercises and they'd have these beautiful sculptures and I would be like, look, I made a worm. But then on the last day of class, we were invited to share some art with the class. And I was very nervous because I wasn't sure how they'd react to some of my poetry and react to some of the way I do things. And I performed it. I had it recorded and I kind of collaged it into a sound collage together. And they were just dead silent for a few minutes. And I was so worried that they had all just were wondering why I was there, what they had just heard, how was this art? And then they started to clap. And that made me feel so much better and so validated that even in a world that thinks of art as a visual medium, that there is still a place for the written word.
Do you think there's a difference between spoken word poetry and page poetry?
I think the line is becoming increasingly blurred because I think there's a lot of page poems that have more impact when they're read aloud, despite being published as a page poem. But I do think there are some difference. I think spoken word kind of has connection to the audience built into the writing, whereas page poetry is a bit more of a cerebral kind of experience. It allows the audience to think a little bit more as they read it and revisit the same lines and go back and see what they missed, whereas spoken word is you have to be right there and honest and blunt the first time.
Why do you think spoken word is so effective in social justice?
I think that a lot of times people in places of privilege, they read articles in the paper and they see stories on the news about people who don't have the same privileges they do. But there's a disconnect because those mediums rely on very professional language and doesn't really go into the emotion and the lived experience of the people that they might be different than. And spoken word is it's vulnerable and it's honest. And it just shows the lived experience in a sometimes painful and provocative and poetic way. And I think that connects to people's emotions and bypasses the whole mind and thinking about it.
That's wonderful.
Thank you.
How do you think the internet is changing spoken word?
Man, I think that spoken word is where it is today because of the internet. The internet is just given so many people a platform that they otherwise wouldn't have. I think of, the big YouTube poetry channels and how those people, talented as they are, they'd only be known in that circle without the internet. I think that as new technologies change and new technologies and social media platforms develop, there's even more opportunities for spoken word.
Happy Halloween, everyone. This poem is called Monster Blues. When a monster like myself sings the blues, it sounds like poetry. We watch the lightning with wonder, for it is the birth and death given to us. When a monster like myself sings the blues, it sounds like a symphony. Each roar joins the others in beautiful cacophony. I hear them and I wonder, if there are so many other monsters, why am I standing in the storm alone? A monster, by its very nature, transcends labels. A monster is an outsider, that which we stare at with hate. A monster is an exercise in how different a human has to be before they are no longer a person. I am told I have very long canines. My mouth gives me away before I even speak, saying, I am not like you. I am dangerous. But how many times can I tell those with pitchforks not to be afraid before it sounds like I'm hiding something? Sometimes I just want to be tied to a table and offered to the lightning. This is the only death fitting someone like me. When a monster like myself interacts with humans, it is the stuff of blockbuster pictures. When I am chased and maligned by the so-called heroes, I try to remember there is fear on both sides of the pitchfork. What they don't know is that a monster only consumes what it wishes it could be. I don't know what I am, only what I want to be. Because I'm not a vampire or a zombie, I'm not popular enough for that. I am a kaiju, mutated and mutilated over and over. This is not what I wanted to be, but there is so much toxicity in my veins that I can't even remember what my original form looked like. I am Frankenstein's creature. There is no one else like me because my creator gave up, and the people like me can't stand me. I don't even know what I am because my body has never been mine. People keep taking my parts away. But I do know this. I may be a monster, but I'm the only part of the movie that anyone remembers. So light your torches and burn down my home. Burn my lightning-scarred flesh. I may be a monster, but I know the truth. I have a pack behind me, even if I don't see them. I cannot be stopped. I cannot be beaten. After all, the monster always comes back for the sequel.
How would you define community?
I would define community as a collection of people with like minds working to the same goal.
Do you ever write in community, or do you find that it's sort of a solitary, isolated experience?
For me, it is kind of a very solitary, isolated experience. That's nothing against the community I'm in. I'm a very introverted, kind of shy person, and I don't like to kind of come out of my little bubble until I have to. And I just find that, like, for at least the first draft of writing, I need to be alone with my thoughts to figure out how I'm going to say things. Maybe I'll do drafts in community, but for the first stage, I need that solitary.
What advice would you have for somebody experiencing writer's block?
It's a very hard question, but I think my advice for someone experiencing writer's block is, as cliche as it sounds, just write something. I had a period of 2 years where I did not write anything at all. I was so beaten down and tired, and so I would just write haikus when I was bored in class, or I would write fan fiction, as legally gray as that is. It was helpful. Just write something that you enjoy, and even if you can't find something to write that you enjoy, do something creative. Like, if you can't write, draw. If you can't draw, make a fan video. If you can't make a fan video, I don't know, go outside and take pictures of trees and such. There's always creativity fuels creativity. So if you find yourself being creative in one way, who knows? Over time, that creativity might spread.
I love that. Creativity fuels creativity. We have time for one more question. Sure. And I just like to give you the opportunity. Is there anything else that you'd like to say, or something that you'd like to highlight, advice that you'd like to give?
I guess I'd just like to have a message for people who think that they can't do spoken word or that they can't do art in a professional way. And I'm just your average critter from Saskatchewan. I have work and I have a life and I have all these things that make it hard to exist in the world, and if I can do this with my crippling anxiety and nervousness and awkwardness, there's nothing stopping you. You can do anything, and I believe in you.
This has been Prairie People's Poetry, with me, Cat Abenstein, as your host. Thanks to Elka Scott for their work, and thanks to you for tuning in. Make sure to like, share, and check out the other videos in our series, and be sure to let us know what you think. Thanks for supporting Prairie Poetry.